The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. That very same day, two of them were on their way to a village called Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking about all that had happened. Now, as they talked this over, Jesus himself came up and walked by their side, but something prevented them from recognizing him. He said to them, "What matters are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped short, their faces downcast. Then one of them, called Cleophas, answered him, "You must be the only person staying in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have been happening there these last few days." Jesus asked, "What things?" They answered, "All about Jesus of Nazareth, who proved he was a great prophet by the things he said and did in the sight of God and of the whole of people." When they drew near to the village to which they were going, he made as if to go on, but they pressed him to stay with them. They said, "It is nearly evening, and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. Now while he was with them at table, he took the bread and said the blessing. Then he broke it and handed it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he had vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us as he talked to us on the road and explained the scripture to us?" The Gospel of the Lord.
There is a lovely story told of a master and his disciples. This was of an era long ago, in a time before we had electronic gadgets, the kind that we have today. And definitely before the time wrist watches came into being. So there was this master, and he had his 4 or 5 disciples along with him. And one day he decided to ask them a bit of a tricky question. So he called them one morning and said, "Hey, guys, come here." And he asked them, "Who among you can tell me, how can we ever know that morning has come and night has gone?" And the disciples looked at one another and thought, looks like a silly question. And then he said, "I'll rephrase it. Who can tell me when light has dawned and let's say night has gone or darkness has gone?" And then one smart fellow put his hand up and said, "Okay, I can answer." And he says, one disciple is answering, and he says, "You know, Master, when in a distance you are able to see an animal, and when you can tell whether it is a dog or a cow or a cat or a crow or whatever else, you know morning has come, light has dawned." And the master just shook his head and he didn't say anything. Then a second disciple said, "Okay, I'll take a shot at this." So a second chap says, "We know morning has come when in a distance you can see a tree. And if you can tell whether that tree is a mango tree or a banyan tree or a pipal tree or whatever else, then you know light has come. You can see clearly." And once again the master was unmoved, very stoic in his manner. So another smart chap said, "Okay, Master, why don't you tell us?" So the master goes on to say, "Okay, I'll tell you. When you look at a man and you are able to see through him and notice the plight of his inner being, that's when you know you are in the morning of your life. When you look at a woman and are able to be perceptive of her inner plight, her joys, her aspirations, her sufferings, her struggles, that's when you know light has dawned. When you are able to look at the world all around and see through all of this and notice that in all of this God is constantly at work, constantly laboring in all of creation, with us, for us, that's when you know you are in the morning of your life. Now, something of this sort happens in today's gospel, if you heard that clearly. The two disciples on the road to Emmaus had a visitor who just trudged along. They didn't know who the fellow was. And they moved along and they conversed and they talked and all of that. Till finally, when they saw him taking the bread, giving thanks, breaking it, and something happened. They were not the same again. They were able to perceive something which they had not perceived all along. They were able to see through something and connect a little more deeply with this person who was Jesus himself. So they began to reach a kind of a deeper communication, a deeper connect, a new kind of relationship they were able to enter into. It was a new encounter for them. It was a new skill probably they picked up, the ability to perceive a little more deeply, to penetrate into a deeper mystery, if you like. Now the sacraments do exactly this to us. The sacraments of the church are meant to help us take on this kind of a penetrative gaze on the world, not just on the 7 sacraments, but on the world, on a whole outlook which is sacramental. So for instance, in confirmation, when we talk of the strengthening we receive in confirmation, we are called to be able to perceive a little more deeply and notice Jesus himself strengthening us with his grace, with his presence in confirmation. Or in the sacrament of matrimony, when we share life with our spouses, husband, wife, we are called to be able to look through that and notice something of the companionship of Jesus, the shared journey of Jesus, the presence of Jesus, through our happy moments, through our sad moments. Look at baptism. In the welcoming of baptism, we see something of the welcome of Jesus, something of Jesus inviting us into the fold to be children of God. Or the sacrament of reconciliation, we see in large part, not just something, in large part, the magnanimity of Jesus himself, his large-heartedness, his mercy, which we are called to experience in and through the sacraments. So the sacraments, for me personally, are an invitation for all of us to be able to take on this kind of a penetrating gaze on life and on the world. There was something that struck me very recently. I was at a baptism in Holy Family Church in Andheri. I'm in Andheri right now. And I was doing a baptism. It went off very well, though the baby was crying the whole time. The whole time, baby was crying. Baby boy. It went off very nicely. There was a photographer there who was clicking photographs. And somehow he did not get a good shot of the rite of baptism, the pouring of the water on the head of the child. So after the whole rite was over, he said, "Father, can I just get another shot of you pouring water over the head of the child?" And he had those lights and all. It looked like a big thing. The 2-3 lights and all. He said, stand in position, pour water again. And the first shot was not good enough. So he said, "Okay, can you take another angle, pour this way?" And I was okay with it. I said, "Okay." So pour from another angle, this angle, that angle, take it a little higher, and do all kinds of things, only for that photograph. And while all this was happening, I was just thinking to myself, this is exactly what happens in baptism. Through that act, through that sign of pouring of water over the forehead of the baby, grace upon grace gets poured by God into the life of that child. This is exactly what is going to happen in the life of this child who doesn't know any of that at this moment. Grace upon grace flows into our life, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we want it or not, whether we are able to acknowledge it and be grateful to it or not. But this is what the sacrament does to us. And while I was in that moment, my mind just went into this, trying to look deeply beyond the external symbols to a deeper communication, a deeper connect that God establishes with us in the sacraments and in general in the world. I am a firm believer of this whole idea of taking on a sacramental outlook on the whole of life. And notice how God is at work in everything, in all people, if only we have the eyes to look and the perceptivity to notice. Another incident comes to my mind. Very recently, last year, I was in Afghanistan. You know, we Jesuits work with refugees in many countries. Afghanistan is one of those countries. And I got a chance to go and give a course over there, a short 1-month course, and I was very happy to go there and to work with. We worked there with people who were previously internally displaced. These are what are called the Hazara tribe. They're a kind of tribe, and they're oppressed by what we call the Pashtun. The Taliban are largely the Pashtun lot, you know. And these people were oppressed during the war. They were all driven out of their country into Iran because they are of Iranian descent. They speak also a corruption of Persian. And so we work there with these people. Education is our big work because the education system is very poor, very unorganized, very shabby, very, very fluid. And the first thing that struck me was all of our students, our teachers in our centers there were hankering for good education. All of them wanted to qualify themselves, get degrees, be somebody in life, study, work hard, all of that. And as time went by, as I spent days with them, and I scratched a little above the surface and went deeper into their lives, it became very clear that education was what they wanted, but what they really wanted deep down was a sense of acceptance of their own identity, because they were persecuted for who they were. They wanted forgiveness, because after the war they were in anger, and anger transmitted from their parents into the younger generation, the children. They were looking for peace. Peace is something that we take for granted in a big way in our country, but their war, they were looking for peace. They were looking for stability in their lives, normalness or normalcy in their day-to-day living. It took only a kind of perceptive gaze to notice, to see through what they externally yearned for, to what they really were and who they really were at the core of their very being. This, I think, my dear friends, for me personally, and I'd like to share this with you, is what we call the sacramental principle, an invitation to take on a sacramental outlook on the world. In all things we do and notice, to be able to see how God is at work in people, in their desires, in their aspirations, in their longings, in their struggles, and then consequently to be able to go out of ourselves and do something for the sake of the world. I pray that this grace be ours today. Let's pause for a few moments of silence. Bring to mind your own intentions. We thank God firstly for this whole day and for all the pilgrims who have come to this place with prayers of thanksgiving or petition. We thank God for everything having gone well. We thank God for Father Trevor Miranda, the chaplain, and all those instrumental in organizing the shrine feast. And we pray for the blessings of the infant Jesus on us, on our families, and on all the things that are close to our hearts.